Life is hard. Almost everyone can relate to this. Most of us face experiences throughout our lives that cause great sadness, hardship, and suffering. But how many and how negative these experiences are vary greatly. There are some people who, for a variety of reasons, feel that their day to day lives are filled with so much suffering that it would be preferable to be dead than for their life to continue. In cases such as these, a question arises as to what the role of the state and medical practitioners should be for allowing or aiding in suicide. In this video essay, I will appeal to utilitarianism to argue that state-assisted suicide should be allowed. To understand state-assisted suicide, we must first define it. State-assisted suicide is also understood by an acronym: medical aid in dying. It refers to any time a consenting and mentally competent adult receives a physician's aid to end their life. Euthanasia for humans as a concept has been around for thousands of years, but our contemporary understanding started in 1942, when state-assisted suicide was legalized in Switzerland. Under Switzerland's legal code, someone is not held responsible for assisting in suicide as long as their motives are not selfish. This is true for physicians and people assisting in dying outside of the medical field. State-assisted suicide became legal in Oregon in 1977 under the Death with Dignity Act. This act allows terminally ill individuals to end their lives through the voluntary self-admission of lethal medications expressly prescribed by a physician for that purpose. As of 2025, 11 U.S. states have created legislation allowing assisted suicide. Of the countries that have legalized assisted dying, one large difference between countries with legislation in place is the requirement of a terminal diagnosis. For example, MAID in Canada has become controversial when Canada expanded the eligible patients in 2021 when they included patients that were suffering but whose death wasn't necessarily foreseeable. This expansion of MAID is known as Track 2 and has raised serious ethical concerns even among proponents of assisted dying. Utilitarianism is one of the most popular and widely referenced ethical theories in the world today. Utilitarianism is a forward-looking ethical theory, which means it is entirely concerned with the consequences of actions as indicators of whether an action is right or wrong. The premise of utilitarianism is simple: all beings seek pleasure and avoid pain. Therefore, every action we commit should maximize pleasure while minimizing pain. The founder of modern utilitarianism was a man named Jeremy Bentham, who is best known for defining utility and creating the philosophic calculus. The philosophic calculus was a way to calculate the pleasure-pain breakdown of every action committed. Bentham also advocated for radical social and political reform. The next great utilitarian thinker was John Stuart Mill, whose main contribution to utilitarianism was creating a distinction between higher and lower pleasure. Bentham's brand of utilitarianism had frequently been criticized as a philosophy for the swines, because it makes no distinction in the quality of pleasure that is experienced. For example, the pleasure someone gets from intellectual enlightenment has no more value in Bentham's philosophy than the pleasure a pig experiences rolling in the mud. Recognizing this, Mill differentiated between higher and lower pleasures. Lower pleasures are body and sense pleasures that humans share with animals. Some examples of these would be sex, eating, and physical comfort. Higher pleasures engage our distinctly human capacities: intellect, emotions, and reasoning. Some examples of these would be engagement in philosophy, reading, and deep discussion. Bentham and Mills were the fathers of modern utilitarianism and paved the way for contemporary utilitarian thinkers like Peter Singer. Peter Singer has advocated for great change in realms like politics and animal rights using contemporary utilitarianism as a basis. Singer has also held controversial opinions about state-assisted dying. We will now turn to how Singer's brand of utilitarianism views assisted dying and if it can offer us a convincing answer as to what role, if any, the state should play. Because utilitarians hold that something only has value because it produces happiness, a human life itself does not hold the same intrinsic value as it does in other ethical theories like Kantianism. The only thing of intrinsic value is happiness, and the only intrinsic wrong is suffering. Therefore, the common argument that life should not be ended because it is sacred does not hold in utilitarian theories. Instead, utilitarians like Peter Singer grant life value because of the quality of said life. satisfaction, happiness that comes as a result of living. If someone's life is so filled with suffering that they are unlikely to be happy, the suffering produced by them choosing to die would seem less severe than the suffering they are experiencing in continuing to live. Utilitarianism leans heavily on personal autonomy and decision-making capacity of an individual. Utilitarian thinkers since Mills have held that a person is always the best judge of their subjective experience. Only a person experiencing their own life can be a judge of whether their suffering is unbearable, so individuals should be granted the right to die and in some cases be assisted by medical practitioners. So how do these legal restrictions and philosophical stances interact in the real world? Many of the core utilitarian beliefs, autonomy and suffering versus happiness, are reflected in the current policy. As seen earlier, major countries have adopted assisted dying policies in cases of terminal illness and sometimes, as with Canada and Belgium, in other cases. However, most countries in the world do not allow any kind of assisted dying. Even among countries that support assisted dying, there is widespread disagreement about qualifying criteria. Singer acknowledges the dangers of allowing assisted dying. In particular, the worry of a slippery slope, where the threshold for assisted dying is so loosened as to be available for any individual experiencing any amount of suffering. Another concern is that marginalized communities would be driven toward assisted suicide as their only option in a world that holds a suffering-free existence as the only thing inherently valuable. Yet another concern is that utilitarian philosophy diminishes the value of life. Many believe life holds great intrinsic value and should not be judged on a cost-benefit scale. These critiques pose valid concerns for both utilitarian advocates and policymakers and must be safeguarded against by establishing deeply vetted ethical standards in non-terminal cases.